Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. This is crazy. Why are you trying to hinder this woman for speaking her truth? I don't understand.
They will also charge the concerned agencies and parastatals to strengthen intergovernmental cooperation in authenticating the identities of individuals seeking consular services abroad. Presidential spokesperson Bayo Onanuga disclosed the directive in a statement issued yesterday. Onanuga stressed that the federal government also reiterated its unwavering commitment to maintaining and strengthening the long-standing and cordial diplomatic relations with the governments of the United States of America and the United Arab Emirates. Lastly, we look at issues concerning the judiciary and the legislature, as the National Assembly has formally responded to a legal demand for the reinstatement of suspended Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan. The federal legislature insisted that the July 4th judgment by the Federal High Court in Abuja did not contain a binding order mandating Akpoti-Uduaghan's recall. It said the court only issued an advisory urging the Senate to consider her resumption. The latest letter, dated July 14, 2025, and obtained by our correspondent on Tuesday, was signed by Charles Yuela, Director of Litigation and Counseling for Clerk to the National Assembly. The letter was addressed to Akpoti-Uduaghan's lead counsel, Michael Jonathan Numa San. According to the legal department of the National Assembly, the court's position does not constitute an enforceable directive, but rather a recommendation that places the decision squarely on the Senate's discretionary powers. Akpoti-Uduaghan, representing Kogi Central Senatorial District on the platform of the People's Democratic Party, has been at the center of a legal and legislative storm since her suspension from the Senate in May. Now, of course, when the CTC was released at FME, it clarified a lot of the issues circulating. There'd been so much information circulating. And of course, thank goodness for the CTC, which came a little bit late, but it clarified all issues.
Exactly that. It did, as you said, it did take a while for it to be received. I think everybody was eagerly anticipating its release, which was supposed to come before Friday and then ended up coming in close towards the weekend. That being said, now that we have seen the CTC, it does, as you said, offer a lot of clarity on this issue. I don't think many people would be surprised to know that in response to the court's response or what they've had to say, that an appeal has now been filed by the Senate President. I don't think that will shock many people. And what it does do is just lengthen this process, because for the supporters of the suspended Senator Akpoti-Uduaghan, they might have been optimistic that with the coming of this court order that she had in some interpretations won, especially since she addressed her supporters and said that she'd be resumed. She obviously thereafter clarified that she would not be approaching the Red Chamber to resume ahead of proper protocols. And it appears that as though in that time, it's obviously given the Senate President the ability, or the National Assembly as an institution, the ability to reject this reinstatement request and then file an appeal. It's, again, as I said, it lengthens this entire process, continues to make it messy, and it just, again, reignites, I think, conversations on what the true motivation behind this is. Is there actual malicious intent, or do you think that though the court has acknowledged the ability of the National Assembly to be able to punish its own members, is this extensive? Can the National Assembly not take into account what the judge has said, what the CTC has confirmed? It is unfortunate that this continues to, I think, distract many people, including these lawmakers, against and away from doing the work that they're supposed to be doing, especially the people of Kogi Central, who deserve to have their representative doing the work of representing them, which is one of the key tenets of her leadership as a senator. So we continue to follow this story, and we hope that it will meet a speedy and amicable end for all parties involved. Going on to the stories that we were discussing in terms of Nigeria's position in the world, and we're looking at these visa restrictions that have been coming from all different corners, from Canada, from the United States and the United Arab Emirates, all of them seeming to be coming one after the other, does paint and definitely hit the Nigerian traveller. And when we're looking at the United States, for example, it is especially unfortunate because first and foremost, it isn't actually on the basis of reciprocity. Nigeria does not offer these same restrictions to United States travelers and citizens who wish to come into Nigeria. So it does, I think, continue to build an unnecessary feeling of bad blood between the two countries, which is obviously not what they want. And so in the president coming out and urging for adherence to, international obligations, it's an instruction for us here in the country, but also for people in the diaspora to be aware of how they are positioning themselves. And at the same time, I do think that we can now continue to talk about the need for Nigeria's ambassadors to finally be announced so that they can also do this work of representing Nigeria on an international scale. But yes, I guess there's a lot to be said and continue to be said about this.
You're very apt point, Femi. See, judicial reforms are long overdue in Nigeria. We have gotten into an era now where judges give judgments that are inconclusive. At first, I thought it was the electoral process that we started hearing the term inconclusive. Now, judgments are inconclusive. And I'll cite two examples. The case of the Labour Party judgment, where the two parties are interpreting it what suits them, and the case of this judgment, where both parties are interpreting what suits them. And I'd like to ask a big question. If a judge says, a suspension was excessive, what also stopped the judge from giving a definitive order that the person should be recalled? Because by the judge giving an advisory order, that's the loophole they have taken now. So when judges give judgments that leave loopholes, it deepens the problem in the country. And that's why I say we need judicial reforms. I was with somebody yesterday that was talking to me about is when they have been advocating for judicial reforms. It's not been today. We need a total overhaul. Payment of judges, what constitutes a judge, people that get on the bench. We need a total overhaul in our country. And that reform also should go to the lawyers. We saw Senior Advocate of Nigeria. It was a day of disgrace and shame. Last Friday, a couple of Fridays ago, go on TV, say that the judgment said, when they had not read the CTC, that they should apologize to the Senate. That the contempt filed against Natasha, the contempt judgment given was an apology to the Senate. And you see, I remember I said it here 1,000 times, that the apology is to the court. I've been vindicated. I don't talk if I don't have my facts. I'm a man of empirical facts. I don't quote what is not necessary. See, I have read through the CTC. I have read through the cross appeal. What the Senate have filed is a cross appeal. They filed a cross appeal against Natasha's prior appeal. And I know all the arguments. What is Natasha saying? Senator Natasha Akpoti saying in her appeal. She said, when the process is followed by the courts to be able to arrive at a judgment of contempt against her, she said in that for contempt to happen, two things must happen. The court must first serve something called a Form 48. If you do not reply to Form 48, then a Form 49 happens, and the whole process becomes against you. There's something called the Sheriff's Act that gives procedural guidelines for contempt. So she's challenging invariably the contempt. Then the Senate, what is the Senate and Senator Akpabio challenging? They're challenging the judgment that even said that the limit of the suspension was excessive. Because I've also read their cross appeal. And they said they're also challenging the fact that the court has no jurisdiction to dabble into matters that align with the National Assembly and all of that. They also said that the procedure was not good enough because in their case, a lot of the dispute resolution mechanisms were not exhausted in the National Assembly before the case came to court. So they are saying the judgment should be struck. And that's why I say it behoves on the judiciary. Two parties now. The first part against Senator Akpoti, he has gone to challenge her part. The second part against the Senate President, he has gone to challenge the part that concerns him. So we are both going to the Court of Appeal on a matter that has persisted for a while. Why we are going to the Court of Appeal is because enough clarity was not made as regards what transpired in the first judgments. And the Senate clerk was right. It was an advisory. You wonder that after somebody had used very hard words on the Senate, oh, you should not remove your member for that long, it's excessive, you will only imagine a declarative judgment up next. But we didn't see that. After you said what somebody was doing is wrong, then the next thing that followed was, at your discretion. So the clerk of the National Assembly that used that lacuna was also right in the writing. But in all of these cases, they are now up to the appeal courts. We'll now go through another round of litigation. But please, this is a clarion call for judicial reforms in this country. We cannot allow this country to continue this way without due judicial reforms.
All Nigeria system, we need reform for everything. The court, the judges, the parliament, everything.